Secretary, I just want to say that I heard what you said, but I don't find it compelling that we can operate the State Department and diplomacy with a 33% cut or one-third cut. It just seems to me like it's, you know, I know you'll do the best with what you have, obviously, but I just think it's showing where priorities are not, and priorities don't seem to be with State Department, with diplomacy. I just want to say that. Because we're short in time, Mr. Secretary, I'd like to start by getting you to respond to a series of questions, but I'd like just a yes or a no if you can. As you may know, and we chatted a little bit before, this committee under Chairman Royce and myself has a longstanding bipartisan tradition, and we've worked closely with both Republican and Democratic administrations. So I was taken aback by, apparently, the Trump administration's apparent decision to ignore oversight requests of Democratic members of Congress. In a letter to the President, Senator Grassley called the administration's departure from longstanding practice nonsense, and I was pleased that Homeland Secretary Kelly, Homeland Security Secretary Kelly, rejected this guidance by saying, and I quote him, "Regardless of who the letter comes from, and it doesn't have to just come from a ranking member or chairman, we'll respond to any congressional inquiry." That's a quote from him. So I'd like to ask you, Mr. Secretary, will you join Secretary Kelly in committing to respond to congressional inquiries and information requests, regardless of the political party of the member inquiring?
I already have, and I will.
Thank you. Can I have your commitment that you will direct the Department to respond to requests for information made by the committee staff as the designees of the chairman and ranking member?
I think, indeed, through the appropriate channels and processes.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, a member of your staff informed my staff that the reorganization you're planning for the State Department will require statutory changes. So I'm glad to know that that's the State Department's position, because I agree with that. When your reorganization assessment is complete, will you commit to coming to this committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, which is oversight and authorizing responsibilities for the State Department, with any requests you have for organizational changes at the Department?
Yes, and we would expect to work with you on that as we're developing those.
Okay, thank you. It was recently reported that within the first few weeks of the administration, top White House aides attempted unsuccessfully to lift economic sanctions imposed on Russia in response to the illegal occupation of Crimea and interference in the 2016 presidential election. This followed repeated contacts with the Russians by Jared Kushner, Michael Flynn, Jeff Sessions, and others. So do you accept the conclusion, Mr. Secretary, of the Intelligence Committee that Russia criminally interfered in last year's election?
Yes, I do, and I have no knowledge of any of those efforts that you mentioned.
Okay. Do you believe that it is in the U.S. interest to relax sanctions on Russia before she has fully complied with the Minsk framework and left Crimea?
I think it is important that we be given sufficient flexibility to achieve the Minsk objectives. It is very possible that the government of Ukraine and the government of Russia could come to a satisfactory resolution through some structure other than Minsk, but would achieve the objectives of Minsk, which we're committed to. So my caution is I wouldn't want to have ourselves handcuffed to Minsk if it turns out the parties decide to settle this through a different agreement.
Well, let me say that I hear what you're saying, but I disagree, because I believe that the only thing that Russia understands is tough talk. And if they think that we're somehow willing to relax the sanctions on them before they've complied with the Minsk framework and left Crimea, I think it just will encourage Putin to continue his bullying, and who knows where he'll strike next.
That is not our intent, nor will we do that. I'm back to the objectives of Minsk.
Okay, and let me finally ask you, what has the administration done to respond to the Russian assault on our presidential election? Have you spoken with the President about how to prevent it from ever happening again?
I have spoken to the Russians directly about it. Their response is pretty much as you've seen their response publicly to be. But we have registered our complaint about that, and that it is going to be a constant obstacle to our ability to improve our relationship if they do not address it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. We go now to